Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to Tuesday's special Big Ten edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion that is posted Tuesdays in the off-season and twice during the regular season. The huddle features WeAreSC.com columnists, staff writers, and historians. We start off first with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojan football news. Let's first meet Tuesday's panelists. A WeAreSC columnist who writes WeAreSC.com's The Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways. In addition to regular season football and basketball reports, he also hosts his own podcast show entitled Locked On USC, Marc Kulkin. The editor-in-chief of WeAreSC.com, columnist, national recruiting guru, and a graduate of USC, Erik McKinney. A former William Jewell College defensive back and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular WeAreSC.com column Musings with Arledge and his own weekly WeAreSC.com video show, Musings with Arledge solo edition, and is a graduate of the USC Law School, Chris Arledge. And finally, a weekly WeAreSC.com columnist who writes Fridays, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, IMHO Sunday, and is an active member of the Football Writers Association of America, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, Greg Katz. Before we kick off this Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's a recap in USC football news. Of course, the biggest news, the Big Ten Conference announced its 2024-25 scheduling model and opponents, which included both for USC and UCLA. We'll go in depth analysis with this big story released in the first half of the huddle. Over the weekend, the Trojans hosted two major local football recruits in Bellflower, California's St. John Bosco linebacker Kingston Vialamu Asa and safety Peyton Woodward. During the visit, Vialamu Asa sent out a Twitter photo of himself alongside Trojans legendary safety Troy Polamalu. And last Friday, three-star linebacker Elijah Newby, 6'3", 205 from Cheshire Academy in Cheshire, Connecticut, committed to the Trojans. Newby had offers from Alabama, Penn State, and Michigan, among the others. And a reminder that the recruiting division of WeAreSC.com, headed by Scott Schrader and assisted by Marshall Levinson, they can be read daily during the week on our premium subscribers portion of WeAreSC.com. And don't forget to watch the Friday WeAreSC.com video recruiting roundup show with host Dylan Brazier and Scott Schrader. Friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership, and we encourage those of you who are watching on sites like YouTube, click on the subscriber button, that's the red button, and like buttons. It's greatly valued and it's free. You can also listen to Inside the Trojans Huddle on many available podcast sites. And a reminder, WeAreSC.com is offering a subscription special. You can get all the WeAreSC.com premium content for 3 months for just $1 or $49.99 for 1 year. All right, let's get things kicked off here. We'll start off with the Big Ten. Here we go. The news of the last 5 days, of course, is last Thursday. The Big Ten made a major announcement regarding the 2024-25 scheduling model and opponents. This, of course, included both SC and UCLA among its new 16-team conference. Before we dive into the 2024 and 25 Big Ten schedules, a couple of important notes. The Big Ten, which has been played in two divisions, will have no divisions beginning in 2024. The top two teams at the end of the 2024 conference season will advance to the Big Ten title game. Each Big Ten team will play 9 conference games, unlike the SEC, which will remain at 8 conference games per season. Big Ten teams were given the opportunity to maintain up to 3 rivalry games per season. The only rivalry game selected by both SC and UCLA, not surprisingly, was the USC and UCLA game. It should also be noted that none of the games for 2024-25 have yet to be given specific dates, and of course, no kickoff times. Now to the 2024 USC schedule and the Big Ten. In 2024, the Trojans will host 4 home games in the Coliseum. Those Big Ten opponents will be Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The 2024 Trojans will have 5 road games, which will include Maryland, Northwestern, Penn State, Purdue, and UCLA. The 3 USC 2024 non-conference games include LSU in Las Vegas and Coliseum home games with San Jose State and Notre Dame. So a lot of stuff has been laid down. Let's go and get your thoughts, panel, your perspectives, comments, scrutiny on the Trojans 2024 Big Ten schedule and the overall 2024 schedule. As always, our leadoff hitter, Marc Kulkin. Marc, what do you say about all this?
If that's not the toughest schedule in the country, I don't know what it is. I didn't do a whole lot of research, but when you're out of conference, consists of LSU and Notre Dame, and then you're going to play a 9-conference schedule, in-conference schedule with Michigan and Iowa and Wisconsin as your home games, and UCLA is a de facto home game if you want to include the Rose Bowl away. That's pretty impressive. And as you mentioned with your lead-in, you know, the SEC chose to go with the path of least resistance. They're sticking with 8 games. I'm old enough to remember USC having this type of schedule, so to speak, back in the 70s when, you know, your 3 out-of-conference games were, you know, Arkansas and Missouri and Alabama, maybe not in the same season, but that was the type of name brand that you would see out of conference going along with your conference schedule. So now all of a sudden you're getting name brands up and down, where, you know, some people don't consider Oregon State, Washington State to be name brand programs. Football in the Midwest and the East Coast, much bigger. This is going to help USC immensely. Recruits are going to recognize, oh my God, I'm playing where, against who? USC can go recruit an Elijah Newby from Connecticut, and his parents can know, I'm going to be able to see my kid play in all these drivable locations, even though he's going to school in LA. The dynamics of this whole thing is amazing. I love it. From the strength of schedule to, I mean, seeing places that I've never been before. I've never been to Maryland. I want to go visit Eric's old stomping grounds, Northwestern. The idea of seeing USC playing in a whiteout in Happy Valley, the only negative, you've got some long distance, you know, travel back and forth that whole year, but I'm willing to deal with it. I'm going to give it a shot, see what it's like.
Erik McKinney, what do you think about this 24th schedule?
I think it's great. I mean, I think that when Marc brings up that it is one of the toughest in the country, it absolutely is. Now, it's not as tough as it could have been, right? USC got Michigan at home. And when you're looking at Michigan, I mean, the 2 programs right now in the Big Ten, right? Michigan and Ohio State. And there's 4 conceivable games: Michigan home or road, Ohio State home or road. If USC had to pick one of those, I'd assume Michigan at home is the one that you'd take out of the gate. And so that's what they got. UCLA goes to Michigan and gets Ohio State at home in that first year. So you dodged hitting both of those, but you're talking about at Penn State. And then really it's the 2 non-conference games in addition to all of those. Getting LSU, your first game without Caleb Williams, is a big deal based on kind of trajectory there with that program. And then having Notre Dame every year. Now, what I'm interested to see, and what I love about this schedule, again, Marc talked about some of these potentially top 5 matchups, top 10 matchups all throughout the season. That's one of the things that I love about women's basketball that they do. And men's basketball has leaned into it a little bit recently too. You have 1 versus 2, 2 versus 4, 1 versus 3, almost all year non-conference in those 2 sports now. And I think it's phenomenal for the game. Now with basketball, you can lose, still get into the 64 team conference or national championship playoff and make it and win a national championship. I'm really interested to see if in football, you're going to be able to lose 4 games, but have that kind of schedule. And if you get that bump, right? If your schedule looks like this, do you get in over a 2-loss team that maybe ducked everybody non-conference, had a conference schedule like, I mean, you kind of look at Georgia's this year, and there's some teams not on there that are in your conference. So that's what I'm going to be interested about, and what we're really not going to get an answer to until kind of rubber hits the road and we actually see it happen. Everybody can say, oh no, we're gonna weigh this more heavily than that or do whatever, but until it actually happens, you just don't know. So again, I would love to see if a schedule looks like that, if you're playing 8, 9 truly ranked teams, right? Not in your first game and then they end up losing 7 games, but you say, oh, we beat the number 9 team because that's what they were in August. I'd love to see kind of that when it opens up to 12. If you could get some of those teams in that play that schedule. So again, that's going to be USC's road. You're going to have these teams on there every single year, and so again, it looks tough. I think when you look at the Big Ten schedule that they got, I'm definitely not going to call it easy, but I think it could have been tougher. Certainly right out of the gate, but it's going to be interesting in that first year, dealing with the transition, the travel, all of those unknowns. There are enough kind of speed bumps in there to know that USC has its hands full right out of the gate.
Chris Arledge, scrutinize the schedule in 2024.
I think it's fantastic. The SEC model of scheduling is boring. And, Nick Saban has recently been complaining to Alabama fans that they're not giving the program the support they want. There were some empty seats at some of the games. Stop scheduling Mercer every year. I mean, really, now, in fairness, Alabama at least schedules one good opponent of their 4 non-conference games, but it's only one. And Georgia is going to play Clemson this year, but everybody else they play is a joke. And so, the SEC teams start with 4 wins against 4 directional schools. If you play in the East, you don't have to play Alabama or LSU. You don't even have that tough a schedule in conference. So you go 9-3 and you're ranked number 8, and everybody talks about how great you are. I hate that. That is terrible for college football. Look, if you have Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, UCLA, Notre Dame, and LSU as 7 of your 12 games, you have 7 fantastic football games for the fans. And I think ultimately, if the Big Ten is going to start having these sorts of games and major non-conference schedules, because in 2024, Michigan also plays Texas non-conference. Not only will the Big Ten start to separate from the have-nots conferences in terms of media revenue, but they may start to separate from the SEC also, because the Big Ten is just going to have a lot more really good football games. So I'm thrilled to death. I realize that it's going to be tough to go through a schedule like that and not lose a couple. But at least your road games are, your tough road games are Penn State and UCLA. I mean, those are winnable. So, but it's going to be exciting. I think it's great for college football. I think it's great for USC. I think it's terrible for the Pac-12. I mean, if you're one of the teams left in the Pac-12 and you're trying to sell how exciting it is to play, I don't know, say you in Eugene, Oregon, you have kids that are looking at this schedule, and then they say, okay, so we'll get to play. I mean, Oregon State, that's our big rivalry game, and we get to play Washington and maybe SMU and maybe San Diego State. I mean, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's no surprise that the Pac-12 doesn't have anybody that wants to show their games, because there's nothing to watch there. So I think it's great. I'm excited. I can't wait to make it out to away games at places like Penn State and Michigan. This is exactly the way college football should be going. And if this works for the Big Ten, I think you're going to see other conferences start to do more of it.
Hey, Chris, how dare you accuse Alabama of playing Mercer this year? They play Chattanooga this year.
Is Chattanooga better than Mercer, do you think?
I don't think anybody knows.
Is that the game before Auburn, or is that their first game of the season?
No, that's the game right before Auburn. That's the get-up game for Auburn.
Well, I will chime in with this. I think this 24 schedule is absolutely brutal. It's like taking the 23 schedule and doubling the challenges of it. But a couple of notes that I thought of, I will be shocked if the first Big 10 game for USC isn't Michigan on national TV. It just reeks of you've got to have a 5 o'clock kickoff for that one. My disappointment is actually that if you look at the schedules, the two schedules that are released, that SC is not going to visit the Big House. And as a football fan, and kind of going back to what Mark said, I would like to go to the some of these away games of places I haven't been. The Big House is one of them. So I guess I'll just have to wait for at least 3 years before SC returns the favor in Ann Arbor. The schedule, it's funny, you hear about, that SC's going in, the teams of the Big Ten, but when you really saw this show that they had on the Big Ten network, by the way, and they did a good job of it, it really put a reality, a face on it that, wow, next year, I mean, to think that the fan bases, and I thought this was a good point that the moderators at the Big Ten network said, that other than within the states themselves, the biggest, largest fan base of alumni of the Big Ten is in Southern California. So when you take that into mind, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of sellouts in the Coliseum. Iowa always brings it. Wisconsin always brings it. Michigan, I mean, to come out to Southern California is a nice thing on occasion, but boy, you can plan ahead on this thing. It really is fantastic. I'll tell you what's going to be the challenge, whoever the SC quarterback is in 2024. We assume it's not going to be Caleb Williams. So it's very interesting. So let's
speaking on Greg, on that point on the sellouts. I mean, one concern, I don't know what the ticket office is going to do, but you're going to have Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan fans wanting to buy up USC season tickets.
Right. Good point.
So I don't know what that means. They're just going to flood in StubHub with the other, five, 6 home games. But something creative needs to be done on that. You may just have to give them a lot more away tickets than you ordinarily would. I don't know.
Knowing Nebraska fans, they may show up to a USC game against another team and say it's a Nebraska home game when Nebraska's not even in it. I mean, the USC fans, they've seen some of the Big Ten teams come out here, but it is going to be, I think, an awakening that first year when these programs are going to look to make a statement about how many fans get into the Coliseum for these games.
Yeah, not a new phenomenon. I know for a fact that when Nebraska visited, when Ohio State visited, that fan base bought season ticket packages. And like Eric just said, some went to extra games, but they sold the balance of those tickets.
Well, you remember some years ago when Nebraska went to Notre Dame and it was about 70% red in that stadium.
Right.
Humiliating for the Notre Dame program. But so I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be it's going to be a lot harder to get tickets, I suspect, than it used to be. By the way, nobody mentioned it, but it's important to note that the Big Ten was able to set up all these huge matchups while still protecting the Maryland-Rutgers rivalry. So I know if people were concerned about that game's still going to be played every single year.
I mean, did anybody have Iowa as the program that had 3 of the protected rivalry games? At no point have I ever thought, oh, Iowa, Nebraska's on. I got to get to the TV to watch that one. That was one of the interesting things to me about, what we're going to have to learn about the Big Ten, I guess, moving over there.
Yeah, I could see Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin being the protected, but when they threw in Nebraska, that was an odd one. Yeah, got to agree.
Just a little side note, since I think one of you brought up the recruiting aspect of the schedule in 2024. I think Scott Schrader had it in his story that the linebacker that SC really wants from St. John Bosco, Viliamu Asa, said that when the schedule came out to actually see who's coming to the Coliseum, Michigan, Iowa, Wisconsin, it really kind of was like a bucket of cold water in his face. He didn't use that term, but in essence, basically, it really got his attention because of the reality of it. And that's going to have a say in what this kid wants. Now, we all know that he's probably leaning towards, or had been leaning to, Notre Dame, but you know, when you start seeing these things turned into reality, you know, it's going to have an impact. Now, 2025, the Trojans will host 5 Big Ten home games in the Coliseum. Those Big Ten opponents will include Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, Penn State, and UCLA. The 2025 Trojans 4 road games, Big Ten conference games, will include Minnesota, Ohio State, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. The 2025 non-conference games for the Trojans include home games with Ole Miss, Georgia Southern, and a road game at Notre Dame. Panel, your thoughts and perspectives and comments on the Trojans 25 Big Ten conference schedule and the overall 2025 schedule. So, Mark, what do you think?
You know, it's obviously not as difficult as the 2024 schedule. It's close, but I love the non-conference schedule. I mean, the fact that you're going to have Kiffin and Helton back at the Coliseum.
That is amazing.
Yeah, that's just amazing.
You've missed those guys, Mark?
I wouldn't say I missed, but there's just so much marketability with that. I mean, think about it. Well, we don't have to talk about it, but the idea of Clay Helton leaving with the victory would be as bad as USC losing to Memphis at home. I mean, it's that low of a loss. And imagine Kiffin getting on the plane from the tarmac celebrating. I mean, there's just so much there to work with. But again, USC going to Ohio State, going to Minnesota, experiencing jump around in Wisconsin for the first time. These are just games that USC fans are going to want to flock to. And I just want to come back to the recruiting point. This is huge for recruiting. Again, parents are going to be able to see their young men play all over the country, and travel isn't going to be an issue. If you're talk to these recruits, NIL is going to take care of a lot of that. And now, again, you can expand your recruiting footprint because all those recruits that USC is getting from the East Coast, the Midwest, they're there. USC is going to be playing those teams. The impact of how USC benefits from joining the big, and I don't know when the newness wears off. It's going to be a while because they got to cycle through all those programs. I love the schedule, and I can't wait till 26 and 27 schedule is released. But yeah, USC playing Ohio State and Nebraska and Michigan State and Penn State and UCLA and Ole Miss in the same season. The SEC teams literally should be hanging their heads in shame.
All right, Erik, should they be hanging their heads in shame?
I mean, I assume for the most part, usually, yeah. But about the schedule, I don't know if that 2025 schedule is all that much easier than 2024. Again, the LSU Ole Miss thing, kind of interesting to see which of those teams is better. Both those teams use the transfer portal really well. So from year to year, I don't know if you can project out what Ole Miss's schedule looks like, but it's also Notre Dame at home in 2024 and on the road in 2025. And then going to Ohio State, going to Wisconsin, those two trips I think are more difficult than any of the trips in the Big Ten, at least in 2024. So it might be a step down for 2025, but I don't see it as a significant one. It's still that's still a tough schedule. Again, when you're playing two real teams, non-conference. I mean, again, you can talk about Kiffin and Ole Miss and whatever, but again, he's gonna have guys. He recruits. He's gonna have players there. And then when you have Notre Dame every year, you're gonna get challenged. You're gonna get challenged. So again, I really want to see, not that I want to skip all this stuff, but I want to see what that top 12, what the 12 playoff teams look like and how teams are getting in there. Can you schedule your way to 1 or 2 losses and slide in, or can you take on kind of a heavyweight schedule drop 3 or even 4 and get looked at as, no, that's a better season, more deserving of a playoff spot than somebody maybe ranked ahead of you as you're going into those final games.
Chris?
Well, I mean, it's exciting that we finally get to see USC play at Rutgers. I mean, that's something that most of us have wanted for a long time. I don't think 4 losses is going to get you in the playoffs. I don't think 4 losses should. If you look at the 2024 season, USC plays 7 good teams, most of them at home. You have to go better than 3 and 4, I think, to belong in the playoffs. But 3 losses with a tough schedule, that may get you in the top 12, especially with the name brand that USC has. Yeah, look, I'm excited about all of it, except I'm not excited about the Kiffin or the Clay Helton return. Kiffin's fine. He's going to bring a real football team. I'm not excited about the Clay Helton return. Why do I want to see that guy in the... For years, I was begging them to remove that guy from the sideline of the Coliseum. Like, I mean, that was all I... It's the only reason I started writing for WeAreSC is so every week I could beg somebody to remove that guy from the sideline of the Coliseum. And now they're going to bring him back after like only a 2-year absence. And
Well, we were afraid that maybe if they didn't bring him back, you may go on beyond WeAreSC.com.
This is a great way to make him earn the balance of that paycheck that they owe him, Chris.
I just don't think we owe the guy any favors. He made $30 million to do a terrible job consistently year after year after year. I don't think we owe him any favors. And this is a favor to him. USC doesn't get anything from playing that crap program. They could play another team that's awful, right? There are plenty of them on the West Coast. We could go play somebody that's awful. I don't know, Cal. I just don't get it, and so I'm opposed to that. I think I'll boycott the game, but other than that, I'm excited.
I a couple of things. Now that the schedule is basically in our face here. You really have to think, and I've said this before, I think the playoffs should have been 16 teams, because when I look at some of the schedules here that are coming down, I mean, it's ridiculous. When I look at the 2024 USC schedule and 2025, and that just doesn't go for USC. It could go for a number of the other teams in the Big Ten, but it seems to me that, that 12 teams right now, I know they wanted to be cautious, but when you really look at this stuff, and I'm sure people in the Southeast Conference looks at Oklahoma and Texas coming in, these are huge superpower conferences now. And I don't think that 12 teams into the playoffs is a good enough number. They have to have more in there. Also, I think, we talk about the road games in 2025. I know Chris alluded to, he's excited about Rutgers, but actually I have been to Rutgers. I did some broadcast work there during the Final Four when the Final Four was still in smaller arenas. But Rutgers is a nice university. I think the thing about USC fans, they love to go to cities where they can do something. No matter how bad Stanford is or Cal is, they like going to San Francisco. And Rutgers is really a short drive from Manhattan. So they may not be a big opponent in terms of let's all get excited about Rutgers. They'll get excited about going to New York City. And Wisconsin speaks for itself. Madtown is amazing. Minnesota, a lot of SC fans remember going to Minnesota. Mall of America. The original Puku de Pepo is there. A lot of kind of neat stuff. And Ohio State, I don't think you need to sell anybody on that one because a lot of Trojan fans went there during Matt Barkley's freshman season. So that's kind of, to me, an exciting 2025 season. All right. Your thoughts and perspective looking at USC and UCLA compared in 2024, 2025. Compare and contrast the two schedules, which is the most challenging and why. I know for our panel, I did send them the UCLA schedules for 2024 and 2025. Mark, how do you compare and contrast who got the better deal here in what year or maybe both years?
No, I think it was Erik who pointed out at the top of the show that USC got the easier of the two schedules between those two programs. I mean, not playing Ohio State and Michigan in the same season, that's a little bit of a break for USC. But you look at UCLA's 2024 schedule, and man, that's a lot of time in the airplane. You're going to Hawaii and LSU and New York or New Jersey, Rutgers, and everything in between. It's an interesting flight pattern that the Bruins will be taking. But yeah, I would say that USC has a slightly easier conference schedule. You know,
What is your thoughts on this? Who wins out on the battle of the schedules?
So I'm it's interesting to me because I think UCLA's 2024 is tougher just because you get Michigan and Ohio State. But is it better to knock both those teams out in 1 year and then not have them the year after? And where UCLA's real advantage, I think, over USC comes in is those 2-play opponents. And again, that's just for this. That's just for 2024, 2025. That doesn't go beyond there. But USC plays Penn State and Wisconsin both those years. UCLA's is Nebraska and Rutgers. Again, not a difficult choice if you could pick one of those pairs to have to play both years. So I think that's where UCLA probably gets the advantage, and it probably kicks in that 2025 year. But again, you look up and down and you think, oh, this team got lucky here, and then you see a name pop up and it's like, no, that's a challenge, and this team got a really challenging one, and then you see again, you host Rutgers or you play Maryland or something like that. So going through the whole thing, it's pretty fair, I think, up and down, even though I know Chris's, big time rivalry game that he's going to be glued in on all the time whenever Rutgers is involved here in this conference. That's always one to watch.
You're the turtle.
Chris?
I mean, UCLA has the tougher schedule in 2024 for the primary reason that UCLA has to play USC, but USC gets to play UCLA. And look, UCLA could lose any of those games. I'm looking at the schedule, and look, the Bruins were better last year. They continue to do well in the transfer portal. Chip Kelly can coach offense. All that stuff is true, but I'm looking at it. Are they capable of losing to Minnesota or Nebraska or Northwestern? Yeah, I think they are. I think they're capable of losing all those games. Maybe not Fresno State, but maybe. It's interesting, too, that LSU plays USC and UCLA in September of 2024. What a crazy thing that is.
And neither in Los Angeles. They don't actually come to Southern California. I mean, Vegas is close, but. Look,
playing games at LSU, at Michigan, and at Iowa in one season, that's a brutal road schedule. I mean, that's brutal. That's not something that Georgia would ever be subjected to. And speaking of Georgia, I see they popped up on UCLA's 2025 schedule, which should be a lot of fun for everybody. So I think the guys are right. The 2025 schedule for UCLA isn't as difficult as USC's, but they still have away games they have Georgia at home and Wisconsin at home. Those aren't easy games. And they have away games at Michigan State, Nebraska, Penn State, and USC. I mean, that's pretty brutal. When that's the easy schedule, that's saying something. So, I think it'll be fun for UCLA fans to see more than 17,000 in the Rose Bowl. Sadly for them, it'll be 64,000 Wisconsin fans and 17,000 UCLA fans, but still, it'll be exciting.
Yeah, I think the UCLA schedule is interesting. To me, it's always the sequence of games. When do you play somebody? When? Who are your back-to-back games with? Are you two on the road? And I look at UCLA and, at LSU, I'd rather be playing LSU in Las Vegas than LSU in Baton Rouge. I can tell you that right now. I think they've got their work cut out for them, but then again, I think SC has their work cut out for them. It really depends on when you look at the non-conference schedules, like in 2025, UCLA is playing at UNLV. Okay, that's not going to be a real struggle, I would imagine. New Mexico, that's not going to be a real struggle. But then, like you said, I mean, when you start going to Michigan State and Penn State, That's going to be a challenge. So with that, let's move on to halftime. Some quick hitters here. Panel, looking at those Big Ten conference schedules in the future, should the Trojans continue to schedule in the future teams like San Jose State, Georgia Southern, and LSU for non-conference games? Chris, what are your thoughts on the non-conference scheduling?
I think you're still going to have to schedule the San Jose States of the world. You need teams that you don't have to schedule a home and away against. And frankly, when you're playing 6 really brutal games a year, you need a tune-up like that, a couple of them. So I don't have a problem with that. I've already spoken about Georgia Southern. No, they should not. Now, look, Clay will probably only be there for 2 more years. So after that, you can schedule them if you want. LSU, yeah, I like having a big time non-conference opponent on the schedule. I mean, it's crazy to have LSU and Notre Dame on the schedule the same year, but it sure makes it fun to watch. So I'm not gonna complain about it. I think that having as many big games as possible makes it fun for the fans, and USC is just going to have to play good football.
Mark, what do you think? I want to ask you a question, Mark. I know that Chris said, it's fun for the fans, and yeah, as long as you win, it's fun for the fans. But these schedules are really difficult. What happens if SC doesn't win as at the level they think that the fans think they should? Is that going to really be a difficult thing to handle?
No, because Eric's touched on this. We've all touched on this recently. 12-team playoffs, and you're scheduling this type of schedule year in and year out, 2 losses is going to be the norm. 3 losses, depending on against who, when they happen, all the, add whatever context and nuance you want, still possibly gets you in. So yeah, keep, an SEC team. Notre Dame's going to be there every year. And if you can't get a team from the SEC, you've got somebody over there in the Big 12 that'll be willing. I'm sure the ACC will be willing. And because you want to keep travel light, you've got the whole West Coast, Mountain West, part 2 now to choose from. You've got the Oregon schools, the Washington schools, the Bay Area schools, the Arizona schools. Make that your 3rd out of conference game if San Jose State or UNLV isn't available. Absolutely, keep it going.
Eric, you're the schedule maker. Do we keep it going?
Yeah, you need to have some of those games in there. I've already put a deposit on a tailgate reservation in 2045 for the 20th annual Chris Arledge USC versus Georgia Southern battle that has become one of the hottest tickets in all of college football. Chris gives a speech beforehand, and then they kick off. It's a whole thing. You can't play 3 Power 5 teams and then a Big 10 schedule as you go through. I don't think anybody wants 3 games against teams where you have to look up what state they're in ahead of it, and USC can't do that. I mean, we talked about Alabama attendance dropping when they play those games. USC attendance would plummet if they played those games all the time. But yeah, you have to host a Nevada, you have to host a San Jose State, because what Chris is saying is true. You can't let your schedule trend to where you have to play all these away games and stuff. You want to keep kind of a 7-5 mix if you can. And I know the neutral site games can kind of mess that up a little bit, but if you can play 7 home games, that's good for you. And if you have, to be able to do that, you need to have buyout games where you don't have to travel and return the home and home series with them. So I don't have a problem, especially early on. I know, you can recover from an early season, a kickoff game loss. If USC drops that to LSU to open the 2024 season, you're not that same team at the end of the year. You can get on a roll and really get things going. But I also don't have a problem with 1 or 2 at the beginning of the year to kind of get into things and get going. So I don't think there's any sense in let's make this a 12 game grueling slate where we're only playing ranked teams all the way through.
Well, I've got an idea, and my idea I'm going to take from basketball. We know that there's such things as the ACC Big Ten Challenge or ACC SEC Challenge. How about they start every season in the future with the Big Ten SEC Challenge, where you match up the teams in the first game by playing each other's conference foe, Alabama versus Ohio State, USC versus Georgia, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That the exclusivity of those two conferences starting off opposing each other, then I wouldn't have a problem playing the next game of San Jose State or even a Georgia Southern, because we know that the matchups would be really intense and physical. But what a way to promote both leagues and get a bigger rivalry than it already is. So with that, panel, do you think that Lincoln Riley will go to the transfer portal for a quarterback if, as expected, Caleb Williams declares for the 2024 spring NFL draft? Chris, are they going to the portal after this next season?
I don't know. Let's see how Malachi Nelson develops. If he's the player that Lincoln Riley expected him to be, then you're going to have a good quarterback battle. I suspect he wins it if he's as good as Lincoln Riley expects him to be, and you still probably have Miller Moss. So I don't know that I don't know if they will. If they do, it's either because Malachi Nelson hasn't developed the way they wanted, or they just want somebody that will supply depth. And you're not looking to bring in a superstar to recruit for the top job. You're looking for a guy who can be, have some experience, who can be your number 3 guy. So I think it's too early to know.
Mark, is it too early to know? What's your perspective? What's your crystal ball say?
Are you asking about bringing one in for 2023?
No, for the 2024
Yeah,
season.
no. Ideally, you hope he can find a high school quarterback that wants to be part of the class. But if not, yeah, I think he's going to hit the transfer portal, because you need depth. You can't just have Miller and Malachi on your roster. You need to have a scholarship level. I don't know if you want to call him elite, but somebody who's willing to compete and that can challenge for a starting job. So yeah, you need to have 3 legitimate scholarship quarterbacks that, even if you didn't recruit one of them, that other quarterback was recruited by a lot of other programs. So absolutely.
Erik, we going to the transfer portal for the 2024 season?
Yeah, probably too early to say for sure at this point. I think Chris is right. It has a lot to do with how Lincoln Riley feels about both Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson toward the end of this season. I think that the quarterback world is so separate and kind of intertwined, I guess, where Lincoln Riley probably won't have to do a lot of recruiting in the transfer portal. If somebody will make it known, I want to play on that roster against that schedule for that team. And if it kind of starts getting out that maybe USC is not so set at quarterback after Caleb Williams, you might have a whole line of guys that want to make that jump and play for Lincoln Riley, even if they have 1 year left. So there could be, I mean, again, it's got to play out in this kind of way, but yeah, you could make another kind of Caleb Williams-ish splash. I don't think there's anybody out there who's him at this point, but yeah, I mean, if one of the top 3, top 5 quarterbacks looked at what that situation was and said, no, that's a better spot for me, I wouldn't rule that out at this point. I wouldn't rule out Malachi Nelson or Miller Moss really taking a huge jump this fall. I mean, I don't know how much time they're really going to get to be able to kind of prove it on the field. But yeah, you need a guy, right? If there's no big time 2024 guy, which it seems like they're sort of heading elsewhere at this point, and you still have a senior season, the idea that like the good guys are the good guys and nobody else can improve or make a jump or anything in the rankings, I think is one of those silly things that fans get into a little bit with the rankings. So you could still find a 2024 quarterback, but no, the numbers kind of say you need to find somebody in that class. And again, if Lincoln Riley needs a big time veteran, I think that's always a possibility for him to be able to go get.
The first thing I look at is the quarterbacks they were going after. Riola. Okay, we know that he declared for I'm getting a brain.
Georgia.
Yeah, and Lagway who's going to Florida. I think if those two actually do what it appears that they're going to do and sign with those two universities, I think they're going to have to go to the portal. And I think the success that Lincoln Riley's had in getting portal players to come over and be tremendously successful, you look at some of the ones that, Jalen Hurt, it begs for it. And I don't think, based on what we're seeing on these schedules, I think Lincoln Riley would prefer to go with somebody that had some experience. If Miller Moss and the others, competition there, they don't pan out. Malachi Nelson, I think, has a lot of improvement to make, but I do think that they'll go into the transfer portal.
Talking about experience, he threw Caleb Williams in against Texas in that rivalry game and went with them. I mean, if you've got it, you've got it, and he's okay clearly rolling with a guy without the experience. So I think a lot of it will be, what does Malachi Nelson show him this year, and that's in practice, and if he gets into games or any of that. But I don't know if necessarily I only want a guy who's played before, because he'll play a young guy if he thinks he can do it. But again, it's going to be really interesting, because trying to guess what the transfer portal will look like 6-7 months before anybody can go into it. I mean, every year it feels like there's going to be some crazy, some guy you just don't expect that hops in there and becomes available.
All right, panel. Having now seen the next 2 years of Big Ten Conference road games for the Trojans, a personal question: what's the farthest you've ever gone to watch a USC football game in either the regular season or a bowl game? Chris, how far have you gone to see the Trojans play?
Well, I've been to Hawaii and I've been to the East Coast. So, I mean, that's as far as we've been able to go so far. We never got that Glasnost Bowl in '91 in Moscow. So if we ever reschedule that one, maybe I'll do that.
Mark?
So I think Ohio State's slightly further east than South Bend. So I'm going to have to say Columbus, Ohio. And that game actually got called early because of the weather. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
And the lightning. So that would be the furthest. But Nebraska, I've been to Nebraska before as well. So I think Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. Erik?
I mean, the farthest mentally I've gone is finishing out the 2021 season and going to all of those games. Physically, I think probably the Orange Bowl, when they played Iowa going out to Florida there.
Yeah, and the farthest I've gone to see them play is definitely the Orange Bowl for the BCS championship against Oklahoma. Tremendous experience, wonderful experience. In fact, it really, I think if you're a USC fan, in a way you learned that there was more to life in the bowl world than just the Rose Bowl. And it was really a lot of fun. But it'll be interesting to see how the Trojans travel. I think fans are going to love the destinations, and you'll see I think you'll see a bigger request for road game tickets than we've seen before. So with that, let's kick off the second half with some recruiting news. Transitioning to recruiting, this upcoming weekend will be the mother of all official recruiting weekends for the Trojans. A big contingent of the class of 2024 talent will come for their official visit. Plans are there for these recruits and their families to experience what last June's big recruiting gathering experience. Among the big names scheduled to come in this weekend are St. John Bosco corner Marcellus Williams, Selby, Texas receiver Traylon Miller, modern day offensive lineman DeAndre Carter, West Hills Chaminade safety Marcus Gallegos, the Decatur, Texas running back Nathaniel Palmer, and Georgia receiver Mike Matthews, just to name a few. Panel, your overall thoughts leading into this big recruiting weekend, and if you care to make any predictions, we're willing to listen to it. Erik?
I mean, my thoughts are they're probably going to do pretty well. That's just a guarantee. What USC's been able to do with these big visits. I mean, you look at what ended up happening with the guys they brought in last June. Are they going to get all of them? No, absolutely not. Are they going to make a significant positive impression on everybody? Yes. And now with the transfer portal, that matters. I mean, it matters that they have that memory, even if they end up somewhere else. Finishing second to a lot of guys is, with how it plays out, again, you want to bring them all in, but if you finish second, that can set you up better down the line where it doesn't work out for them early on. And now when they transfer in, you've got them kind of hooked because they don't have that free transfer anymore. So again, I think that there's going to be probably commitments, probably multiple, I would guess, coming out of this. I think one of the guys, not that he's ready to go, but one of the ones that a couple of the local guys that I would say it would be good to get commitments out of them. Marcellus Williams and Marquise Gallegos, both secondary guys, a corner and a safety. Again, just kind of building up, I guess, continuing, right, the momentum from a couple weeks ago, where especially locally, you get guys and to be able to have guys buy in or at least announce, you know, hey, yeah, we're in, let's go, we're in, let's go. To have that kind of happen throughout the summer, I think is helpful, instead of like getting those 5 and then a bigger lull. So again, not saying that they're ready or that they're going to go, but I think locally, at least, looking at those two guys could be good. But we saw what happened a couple weeks ago. They ended up with, I think, 5, maybe I think 6 out of that visit total. And so, yeah, if I had to bet right now, yeah, there's going to be a couple that we're talking about either this coming weekend or early next week.
Chris?
Yeah, look, they seem to have figured out how to do these big recruiting weekends. And, you know, part of that, I think, is that when you have all of these big time players there together, they can sort of recruit each other, and they can imagine what it would be like to have those guys on the roster. And so I think having these big groups helps. I'm not going to make any predictions because I don't know anything, but I will say that Mike Matthews is sort of an intriguing guy because, you know, he's from Georgia. He's a 5-star. You'd think, you know, this is not the sort of guy you pull out of Georgia, but I don't know. I mean, he's a wide receiver and seems to like the flash of Los Angeles. He could make a worse decision than choosing to play in Lincoln Riley's offense. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, they're going to get a bunch of commits, and it looks like, you know, a month ago, people were looking at the recruiting class saying, what's going on? They only have a couple of commits. We're number 58 in the rankings, whatever it was. I think Lincoln Riley had a clue what he was doing. And so after this other big weekend, I think you're going to have a class that's probably 80-90% full, is my guess.
Mark, how do you see it? Yeah, no. If they have any type of hit ratio that was close to what they did 2 weeks ago, yeah, Chris just talked about the class ranking. There's a possibility they could be touching the top 10 before the weekend. You get that hit ratio that you had 2 weeks ago. Now all of a sudden you're saying, all right, well, now they're closing in on the top 5. And you know Lincoln Riley and USC closes really strong on recruiting. You get a guy out of this recruiting weekend that decides to wait till signing day. Now you're starting to challenge for, you know, that mythical national championship in the recruiting ranking. So it's big. They lined this one up specifically last year. They saw what can happen. That kind of gave them something to work with. And I know they're going big this time. They're talking about it. I mean, they're promoting it. We're going big this time. And that's going to leave an impression. Whether or not they bring in another GOAT, you know, a Troy Polamalu type to close the deal, who knows? But again, do you want to be Kingston Viliamu Asa to say, I'm sorry, Troy, I know you're a Hall of Famer, but I need to go to Ohio State? How do you say no to that? those are the types of resources now that USC's used in the past, but now they can, say, hey, it's a much stronger resource, and listen to what I'm saying, and look what's ahead. Look who you're going to be playing against. Look at the other players that want to come play with you. Yeah. This is a perfect storm right now with the Big Ten, the schedule release, this recruiting weekend. Nick Saban has a reason to be whining. And there's a good reason.
Yeah, I think, Mark, I think you're correct. I think that they have figured out the formula. They've talked with Pete Carroll how he did it. I know that for a fact. I know that Miss Hansen there has really got that recruiting visit stuff in the background on players, what they like, what they don't like. I mean, it's all there. You can never complain at this point that the effort isn't there, the impressions aren't there. And let me tell you, even if SC doesn't get some players from across the country, those players are going to go back into the communities and say, what a wonderful time. It was great. You got to go on a recruiting trip. And there might be a future player from their region, from where they're coming from, that might take a trip to USC based on their teammate or older person going. So all sorts of positive can come out of it, even if you don't sign the player. Now, panel, if you were an out-of-state recruit, besides visiting the USC campus and the Coliseum, what would you like to see, Erik?
So putting myself in those shoes, I'm always surprised, and this is going back years and years, it always kind of makes me take notice. A lot of these guys, when they come out to USC, it's the first time they've seen the ocean. I mean, that I remember talking to a few kids where that was one of the big things. So again, it feels like now they travel more, there's more events, they're out, bi-coastal, they do all of that, but that still would be, I mean, there's a reason, right? USC takes players to Manhattan Beach, Malibu, that area. They go over to the coast every time they come out here. So that would be it for me. Again, if that was my first potential experience seeing that, yeah, that'd be on the list.
Chris?
Yeah, I agree with Erik. The other thing that, when kids think about LA, they think about Hollywood, they think about stars. So, obviously the Lakers aren't playing right now, but, taking kids to Lakers games where they get to see the Lakers, they get to see the arena, they get to see the Hollywood stars that are there. I want to take the kids somewhere where they can get a taste of that, because that's not what you get in Norman, Oklahoma. I've been to Norman, Oklahoma. It's a fine enough place, but there aren't, there aren't Hollywood starlets running around. And so I think that out-of-state kids who are looking for something different, they're looking to, and they're interested in Hollywood, show them a little bit of Hollywood. Not maybe not Hollywood itself, but show them some flash, because that's what USC can sell that almost nobody else can.
Mark?
Yeah, obviously, if you got somebody flying in from Colorado or Nebraska or Iowa, they probably have never seen the ocean before. So you want to get them out there, let them check it out. But there's so much to do in Southern California. I mean, even if the Lakers aren't playing at Staples Center or Crypto or whatever it's called, I've heard from the recruits say, just being inside that arena and having a genie bus, telling them about the history of the Lakers and her affiliation with USC, that leaves those kids, kind of with that shock and awe face. You can take them to a Dodger game. There's so much you can do. And then there's just too many restaurants to pick and choose from. So yeah, it just depending on where the kid is from, you tailor it to kind of suit their needs.
Yeah, I think Hansen probably has her finger on that one. I know. Remember, I believe it was 1 year, but then they take the recruits on a Sunday morning and they had breakfast in the Crypto Staples, whatever you want to call it, floor, and the kids were all excited that they were in the same building as all the Laker immortals that they used to see. That's the big deal. That is a big deal. And the beach is a no-brainer. You can never get tired of going to the beach, especially if you don't have great access to see it. All right, so let's see here. Let's wrap up this regular portion of the second half with a really interesting thing here, which I think really is worthy of discussion from the panel. There is a new future high school spring football league that will launch next spring and will likely affect future USC recruits. It's called the Prep Super League, and it's being launched by former USFL president Brian Woods. The Prep Super League will last 6 weeks, running from April 19th through May 24th of 2024, and it will be a live 11-on-11 games, which will include rushing the passer. These super teams will be located in Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, Houston, New Jersey, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Miami, Phoenix, San Diego, and Tampa. According to Woods, the league could supplement current recruiting camps and 7-on-7 programs that provide recruiting showcases for prospects during the months they aren't playing high school football. Funding for the league would be through a player development fee. Woods compared it to the money paid for other traveling team programs. Additional revenue could come from sponsorships and ticket prices. The league also plans to launch an app that will offer live streaming of games. To be eligible, players must be enrolled in an accredited middle or high school curriculum and live in one of the league's 12 markets. Woods said he planned to target prospects entering their sophomore or junior year of high school beginning this fall. Panel, the Prep Super League, good idea, bad idea? Your thoughts on this Prep Super League in the spring of 2024? Appropriately, we'll go to Erik.
No, this is a terrible, dangerous idea. I mean, I don't like anything about it. If you want to completely replace high school football and just do a, I don't know, semi-professional league, then I get it. They're trying to target the area where they're not playing high school football because kids shouldn't be playing high school football at that time. These kids get worn out just doing unpadded 7-on-7 stuff with how much time they spend on it. They need that time not to be going full 11-on-11. I think a lot of it is, the best kids don't need that exposure. And I don't think the lower level kids are going to get recruited anymore or really be any better because of it. I mean, I think you need so much sort of ramp up time to get to where the teams are competent or you're really accomplishing anything. It feels like such a money grab, especially when you start throwing around, oh, kids can earn NIL and do all this stuff with it. It seems completely unnecessary at this point.
Chris Arledge.
I think Erik was too positive. I think it's a horrific idea, and he's right. He called it a money grab. The thing is, whose money are they grabbing? Right? The kids have to play a fee to participate in this, and you're going to tell them, oh, but if you do this, maybe you'll get some NIL money and you're going to get exposed to colleges. No, probably not on either one of those things. The guys that are capable of landing NIL deals, the Malachi Nelsons of the world or the Zachariah Branches, whatever, these guys who are legitimate high school superstars and somebody might be interested in paying them something, those guys don't need the Prep Super League. And if you're a high school player like I was, you're just an okay high school player. Nobody's throwing NIL money at you. It's just, and you're going to have guys who are going to get injured. I think in a lot of states, if you play this after you play this before your senior season, you're going to be ineligible to play your senior season in football unless they change the rules. And now we have, like you had all those years in college basketball where the AAU stuff becomes a lot more important than the high school season. And then you have a bunch of guys running around that you have to try to win over or pay or whatever in order to get the ear of their players so you can recruit them. It's just horrible. It's all horrible. This is a worse idea than bringing Clay Helton back to the Coliseum.
Marc Kulkin, can you improve on the positive comments that Chris just brought forth?
So the fact that, these players would have to pay immediately kills the idea for me. Now, with that said, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. I have talked about this before. I truly think this is the beginning of your minor league system. How it starts, how it turns and becomes whatever. A couple of years ago during COVID, Chris, you brought this up just a minute ago. If you wanted to play club football, say for Winter Circle, you at a certain high school said, well, then you can't play, when we have our regular season. So you might have, this type of league form, say, all right, well, yeah, you have to go to school, but you don't have to play football during the time of year when everybody's going to school. So now you can go to school and now you can come play semi-professional football, hone your skills, we'll pay you. I don't know. I can see this going somewhere in the future, especially if it's targeted at certain demographic markets. Let's just be honest.
When did your school year end, Mark? You didn't go to school in spring.
When are they planning to have this season? Not during high school. It's during the off season, right?
No, it was like April to May.
Yeah.
It's April 19th through May 24th.
So they would have this during the school year after the football season.
It seems like right in the middle of spring ball for high school.
CIF wouldn't allow that, at least if we're just talking in California. You cannot do it. So you would have to make a choice.
Yeah, and it's going to be an easy choice. I can't imagine this is going to do anything other than fail spectacularly.
It probably will, but
especially because look, there's something great about high school football. I mean, and high school football's changed somewhat, especially in Southern California, where you're just recruiting all the kids from all over Southern California to two schools, and I don't love that. But there's something great about high school football, playing with your teammates and playing for your school. It's a big deal in the high school. I mean, that's great. This is not great. Choosing this over playing high school football is a terrible thing. I don't think anybody that's worth anything is going to do it.
I didn't say it was great. I'm seeing this is something that's, look, you just said it, Chris, it's changed. In California, it's hard to field a JV team at certain schools. So yeah, there's an opportunity here. It's just a matter of how it comes about. I don't see it being successful, but you never know. Whoever thought USC would be in the Big Ten 10 years ago?
Good point. I feel I have some expertise.
But wait, USC's not playing a Big Ten schedule in the spring and then a Pac-12 schedule in the fall. I mean, that's kind of where the difference here is on this. You might be asking these kids to play, right, 2 seasons in a year, or just leave high school football right? That would be the ask, is you stop playing high school football.
There's talk about building an IMG academy in California. Let's be honest, is IMG Academy really a school?
No, it's
I
an
don't
academy.
know. I assume those guys do have to go to some sort of class, right?
Sure.
Okay.
So do Hollywood kids who make movies. They go to some sort of class. I mean, we've heard the horror stories there.
What I'll say on this is I was one of the founders of what's now known as traveling team ball, National Traveling Team Ball. And I can tell you that when we started the idea of taking great players beginning in Los Angeles area and putting them into 8 regional teams, San Diego, Ventura, Intercity LA, San Gabriel Valley, San Fernando Valley, we had to figure out an idea how it would not impede on high school basketball, the spring leagues, the summer programs. How could we do it without it being a threat, not only for players transferring, because few players transferred in those days, but I will say this: what we did was we got the best coaches from the best leagues in each one of these regional areas, and they had to be coaches from 3 different leagues. Let's say San Gabriel Valley. It had to be like the Pacific League, the Citrus League, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that it could work in basketball. I don't think it works in football. And I'll tell you why, because number one, I think Erik mentioned it, and some of you probably mentioned it. If you look at those dates, that just rams right up to spring football, right? And you don't want to, you think that coaches from Texas are going to sit there and go, oh, this is a really good idea. Okay. You think some of the Dominic Riolas are going to risk going and playing 11 on 11 in the spring when his mind is probably how much it's going to take for him to get to the NFL. I think it's a bad idea because it's got a lot of issues that I don't know whether they've been well thought out with the, shall we say, the players' best interest involved. Now, you probably can fill a roster. There'll be players that say, I need this exposure. But I don't see how you conflict with spring football because it is such a big deal. And I think that's going to be the death knell of the league going forward. I think it's an interesting concept. I don't think it's a rational concept. So with that, let's head to overtime. Some questions that we held over from last week, I promised we'd get to, and some others. So here we go. Panel, just chime in. There's no pecking order at this point. This is from Chicago, USC. Panel, each of you are the head coach of a P5 program. You're having a great recruiting class with 3 5-stars coming in next year. What positions would you like those 5 stars to play? You can pick any position on offense or defense. All right. Who wants to give their thoughts on this?
Defensive end, nose tackle, defensive tackle.
All right.
Yeah, I was going to go quarterback, interior defensive lineman, and edge rusher.
I will go along with that. I think you start at quarterback, and then you got to get the defensive rusher. Linebacker would also play into it to me. Any other questions?
No,
right.
all of those.
Okay. He had a second question. It says, this is for Greg Katz. What are 1 or 2 things coaches can do to get better? I would tell you, in my long coaching career, the best way to get better is don't think that you know it all. Keep going to clinics, go to watch teams that, no matter what sport it is, go watch teams that you may not like their style, but you may play against their style someday in a new league, new conference, playoffs. How can you tell if a coach has what it takes to become better? I think when you come in contact with other coaches, it's kind of like, coaches know other coaches. I know that when I watch a game, the first thing I look at is clock management in the fourth quarter, whether it's football or it's basketball. I want to see how they use their timeouts. It drives me nuts to watch some of these coaches that get paid a lot of money to not use their timeouts appropriately in the second half. It drives me crazy to sit there and watch them how they manage the clock. It's just those are little things. And then how do I know they're going to get better if they don't mess it up the next time? I mean, I will say this, and I'll take heat for it. I want to see Lincoln Riley and the clock management get better from what I saw in his first year. I think it will, but some of it was like what are we doing? And he's obviously a much better coach than I'll ever be. He's proved it at the college level. But these are things that I think even normal fans go, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? The big question is, do they do it in future games and learn from the past? So ability to learn. All right, question 2 from Chris in West Virginia. In your opinion, has 7-on-7 helped or hurt evaluating high school prospects? Furthermore, has it helped or hindered player development coming into college? Which positions have been affected the most either way? I know that a number of our panel here are going to go watch the Elite 11 coming up this weekend and some other stuff. What do you guys think about this 7-on-7 play and the questions that Chris is asking from West Virginia?
Helped absolutely immensely. Every position, any position that gets that amount of reps and time on the field and all of that, it has helped. The quarterback play that we have seen, I remember going to the first Elite 11s, and it was really that there was a California quarterback or two, and then seeing these other quarterbacks from these other states, the difference was enormous. And now you're starting to see quarterbacks be able to go in and play. Wide receivers, I think, was the first position where you really started to see these true freshmen can go and play right now. And it's the amount of reps that they're able to take, and amount of like highly competitive reps. There's some stuff that you see in 7-on-7 that is absolute garbage, right? Running like crossing stuff where you'd have to get through about 12 linemen to be able to get to where, you know, if you're running right across from where the snap is. So there's stuff like that. Yeah, that doesn't translate. But at the end of the day, if you're running and cutting and catching balls and seeing coverages and all of that, yeah, it absolutely gets you better. It lets you, in terms of evaluation, yeah, you can get eyes on more players. You can see, again, what do they look like in terms of competition, their height, right? Height, weight, all of that kind of stuff. It's immensely helpful. I think there's still a point where, you know, take it easy a little bit, find some breaks for your body and all that. The guys that just go all the way through, I don't know how helpful that is, but yeah, by and large, it's a big time net positive 7-on-7 stuff.
Yeah, and that's just on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, just from the defensive reps, you know, you've got defensive backs who are literally now, as you talk about, Eric, you're going up against some really elite talent at the skill positions on offense. You have to learn how to cover a guy who's bigger than you, a guy who's smaller than you, a running back coming out of the backfield, a guy that looks like Darnell Washington who goes to Georgia, who by all intents and purposes looks like an offensive tackle, but is a great tight end. So those types of things, just the technique alone that you're learning, the amount of reps, and you learn how to read offenses. You know when to, okay, I got to let my guy go. I got to peel in and play zone. It's that type of stuff that you can now carry over to spring ball or fall camp, whatever, the next time you get to use those skills. So yeah, it helps. You can also get habits too, but for the most part, it's a positive.
Inside linebacker, right? Dropping in coverage and all that stuff. Yeah. And like you said, cornerbacks, I think it's yes, a plus. It's also, depending on the type of tournament and officiating and whatever, you do get some of these guys that feel like, oh, I can just throw this guy down on the ground and that's how I win my reps. And then if that shows up in the fall, you've got some issues. So yeah, you have to pair it with coaching and all of that stuff, but just the reps alone that they get extra are good.
All right, question 3 from Gio in Dallas, Texas. I'm not quite sure what this is about, but he says this has to be a huge recruiting tool for us, right? I assume he's talking about the Big Ten move. Have you heard from talking to prospects directly that this has significantly moved the needle in favor of us? And then he has FTFO. I'm not quite sure what that means. I'm not quite sure that I want to know what it means.
Yeah, he's pulling his inner Sark.
So I'm going to kind of cut it there. I'm going to assume he's talking about the move to the Big Ten. I think we have directly, at least not me personally, but people like Scott Trader, maybe Mark, I'm not sure, talking to prospects that this move has significantly moved the needle in favor of USC. Any comments?
It has. I mean, just read the comments that Scott wrote about just recently from Kingston. I mean, it moved the needle. And yes, I've heard it personally from other recruits as well. Eric, I'm sure, has got plenty of anecdotes that he can release on everybody.
No, it's a big thing. Yes, it's positive for USC.
Okay. Question 4 from B Davis 711 Irvine, California. Panel, what do you guys think is the likelihood of USC getting the whiteout treatment in Happy Valley in 2024? And what game are you most looking forward to in 2024? Fight on. Yes, 2 questions, but let's address this first one. I'll say this. I think it will be a whiteout game. I think to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. USC, kind of the intrigue of the Trojans. What game am I looking forward to the most in 2024? I think it's going to be Michigan. I think there's a sense. The last time I saw Michigan in the Coliseum was decades ago when they played UCLA. I mean, this had to be in the 70s. So it's, for all the times SC has played a Big Ten team, basically in the Rose Bowl outside of a Cotton Bowl appearance, you usually don't see too many Big Ten teams play USC in a non-conference game. Comments?
So the Penn State whiteout game is interesting because I don't know, it'll be schedule makers or the networks that have a big say in that, because Penn State only does whiteouts for night games. So I think this year, like Michigan didn't get the whiteout game because it's a Fox big noon kick. So if Fox wants that, right, if USC Penn State goes big noon, then it won't be the whiteout game. And Penn State, I think, has Ohio State on the schedule then too. So I think that, yeah, it certainly would be in the conversation, but it has to meet those, I think, qualifications to be a night game for it to even be considered as that whiteout, because Penn State seems like they're pretty set on their whiteout as a night game.
Yeah, I know Nebraska is not what they used to be, but Penn State has a home schedule that involves Nebraska, Ohio State, and USC that year.
Awesome.
I mean, that's
awesome.
It's not the same Nebraska. I know that, Tommy Frazier's not going to be out there, but still, that's three unbelievable names to have on one home schedule in 1 year.
So I want to the 2024 game. I think Michigan is the one that for sure pops out. But and it's a personal thing for me, right? My wife went to Northwestern. I have friends that went to Northwestern, and so we go to Chicago quite a bit, kind of back there. But what is intriguing about that Northwestern game at Northwestern in 2024 is that Northwestern, the plan is to rip down Ryan Field, their football stadium, completely at the end of 2023. So I think 2024 and 2025, Northwestern needs to play home games somewhere else. And I don't think anything official has been announced, but certainly kicked around in there, Soldier Field and Wrigley Field as two possibilities. Getting a USC Northwestern game, again, that would depend on kind of when in the season, right? If baseball season is still going or not. Getting a USC game at Wrigley Field would be a pretty cool thing to be able to do. So that's kind of a sneaky 2024 game in there. And also, the Chicago trip obviously is always a fun one. And you don't have to go to Chicago and then find time to drive and pay all the tolls to get out to South Bend on that one.
Let's not sleep on that LSU game. That is
thank you.
That game has been a long time coming, right? I mean, since 2003, probably.
That was Ed, right? That was Ed Orgeron and Clay Helton, I think, were the coaches when that was announced. I think that was the matchup.
And who would have guessed it?
That's a great game. I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
I was just saying, who would have guessed that the head coach of Notre Dame would be the former head coach, the head coach at LSU would be the former head coach at Notre Dame. Odd, unusual.
Yeah. And my first USC game ever in person was LSU at the Coliseum in 1984, which didn't turn out well. So I'm looking forward to this one. I'm hoping to get back to 1-1 after that.
USC fan and LSU fan mingling in Las Vegas that's going to be an interesting mix.
Yeah.
So,
Get the security guards out.
Mardi Gras anywhere but New Orleans, but I have a feeling there's going to be that type of atmosphere going on.
Absolutely. I think that this is a good question, and that's why I'm going to do two questions from B. Davis, 711 Irvine, California. It's a recruiting question. Do you guys have any idea how a recruit can have so many different rankings from the different recruiting sites? A recruit can be 49 nationally on one site and 4 nationally on another. Is there no set criteria that the sites use? I'm going to throw that one open to Erik and to Marc, and Chris, of course, chime in. What is your perspective on this question?
I got nervous when you started with, do you guys have any idea? I mean, usually no. So that was a little bit terrifying. But I mean, what's interesting about the numbers, right? If you're ranked number 15 and you're ranked number 75, that's not out of 75 players. Like, that's out of tens of thousands of players. So if you're talking about the top 500 players, the top 700 players, that I think most sites are pretty much uniformly in agreement that those guys, that's where those players are. Nobody's a 5-star somewhere and a 2-star somewhere. So I think they're all right there, but it's some of it's movie taste, right? Like, what do you as an evaluator think is the most important thing? Is it size and frame, and then it becomes projectability? Is it what you've done in high school, how dominant you are at this time? So it's not the same guy for all of the different services ranking these players, and they all go in with different things that they feel are important. And I think a lot of them go in too with, what do we want to hit on? Do we want our 5-stars to be the instant impact true freshman college stars, or do we want to look at it in 3 years at the NFL draft and say, no, these guys developed and now, that's where they are here. So it's just different people, different tastes, different things going in, and different, wants coming out. But again, at the end of the day, if you're number 100 here and number 250 here, that feels like a big gap, but it's really not when you're talking about the absolute number of names that could be on these lists based on who's out there playing high school football.
No, until you remove the subjectivity factor out of this and add some, real objective data points that everybody's going to work with. I've made my point on this before. I'm not a big stargazer. I look at the program that's offering. That's what really matters. So as far as that's my whole stance on it. Yeah.
There's a lot more to being a football player than being tall and fast and having long arms. All that stuff helps. And if you don't have that, you're going to hit your ceiling at some point where you're not going to be able to play anymore. But, there's a lot more that goes into it than that. And it's sometimes tough to tell on a high school field who has that it factor.
Oh, there's also the political side of it, if you want to use that term, that, if you don't talk to a certain network or a certain person, that evaluator might rate you lower. There's been guys throughout history who have done that, who said, who I am, you better talk to me or else. Get rid of that type of person, and then you don't see that, well, that guy's rated 100 and he's rated 250. Yeah, they're rating him out of 10,000 guys, but that's still a pretty large number when you're going from on 3 to 24/7, if that's the difference.
Well, I think grading the players is it's no different than being a Major League Baseball scout. It helps if you've played the game. It helps if you've coached the game. It helps if you understand the game. And you try to take the fan out of it. One of the things I've always done when I would go fairly regularly to the camps I wanted to see was I wanted to see who the top 15 players were. And I wanted to see if, in my opinion, that they lived up to what I was looking at in evaluating them. Many times you see players that have this big reputation and you watch how they work. Do they work hard? Are they dedicated even in camps? Do they love the game or do they like the game? There's so much that goes into it. And I can tell you, when I ran those big basketball summer leagues in the 70s and 80s, I saw a lot of players in basketball that were given really high marks. I mean, guys that were in the league that I was in, and I'd get Street and Smith's college basketball magazines, and sometimes they would quote me on players. But the point is when you see these players, are they really as good as what they're billed to be? And I totally agree with Mark. See who's recruiting the players. If I see players being recruited by Alabama, I don't need to know much more because I know what the track record is of Alabama. Let's move on here. We only got a couple of questions left and we'll wrap this thing up, but I wanted to get to as many people as possible. This one's from Chicago, USC. I think, Chris, we're going to direct this one at you. Is there a lawyer on the panel? I guess there is only one that I know of that can address the new IRS ruling regarding the NIL collectives. Do you have any perspective on that? I don't.
I do. Do you think, did this guy know that there's a lawyer on the panel? Or is this just a shot in the dark? Like, I really hope that there's a lawyer on this panel, on this show that I watch. Look, it's relatively simple. I'm not a tax lawyer. I'm not offering legal advice. And so I'm not engaged by any of you, but I can give you my off-the-cuff thoughts. If you want a 501c3, and the idea is that it's going to be a charitable organization, you can, it has to be for the benefit of the public, not for an individual or a small group of identified individuals. So I can start a 501c3 where I'm going to raise money to feed the poor. I cannot start a 501c3 so I can raise money to feed Jim, the homeless guy that's always on the bench outside my building. And so the fundamental problem with the collectives who want to be 501c3s are that they're generally trying to find ways to funnel money to identified people, i.e. football and basketball players at a particular university. And that's not going to fly. The letter from the IRS that came out, their opinion letter, was not a surprise to anybody who knows anything about this. I mean, that was, I don't know how they could have gone a different way. So that's the thing. You're not going to do that. People can still donate money. They're not going to be able to donate money and get a tax break if they're trying to funnel money to Malachi Nelson.
All right.
And right now, just to add, because there's obviously going to be a USC slant to anyone who's asking questions of us, but right now that doesn't seem to affect USC's kind of the biggest one. I think House of Victory is kind of the one that people think of right now with the way it's operating and how kind of out in front it is when it comes to USC NIL. And so that one still going, still pushing forward. I think the idea is that there's a collection of collectives out there that are operating still right the wrong way, like what Chris is saying, where it's like, yeah, we're a nonprofit that collects money to give to good football and basketball players, and like that was never gonna fly, and some of them just decided we're gonna do it anyway and see what happens. And so this was kind of just the first step in announcing again, that's not going to work. So if they can figure out kind of a charitable bent to it and all of that kind of stuff, then you can still operate in this. You're still going to, this is not going to shut down collectives. I mean, if that's a question, does this shut down collectives and NIL and all of that? No, I mean, absolutely not. Those are still going to go forward and push on. So I think that there are a lot of collectives that launch knowing this was going to happen and this doesn't touch them at all. I think there's some of them that have to maybe pivot a little bit, and then the ones that are operating right in the crosshairs of this, who knows if they care enough to do anything about it anyway. So it'll be kind of interesting to see where things go from here. But as far as USC is concerned, I don't see this making a huge difference at this point.
Erik, we're going to stay with you on question 6, and Marc, you can chime in on this. From Corona Trojan fan living in Vancouver, Washington, how much will the WeAreSC staff have to adjust when the Big Ten games begin in 2024? There'll be a lot of new cities, towns to travel to, and a lot of new university athletic staffs and stadiums that those reporting on the games will have to adjust to, right?
Yes.
I'd assume so. Getting to Pullman, Washington is not an easy thing, though. I mean, there's been travel involved in some of this stuff. I mean, Corvallis, same kind of thing. Yeah, the flight to DC to go out and see Maryland is a different flight, but going to Pullman, you've got 2 flights to get over there, and then a big old drive to get down to where Washington State is too. So there's been travel in this conference as well. Clearly, not having the weekender or going out to Arizona or those kind of trips is different. But I like that USC UCLA, right? So that's a road game. So USC is never going to have 5 massive, huge cross-country trips in one year. It'll always be sort of capped at 4, and a lot of these places are pretty easy to get in and out of.
The one difficult, I guess, our new Pullman trip is going to be Happy Valley. I don't know exactly where you fly into to go to Happy Valley, but I can't imagine that there's a international airport. So that's going to be interesting.
Harrisburg.
I'm sorry,
You fly into Harrisburg.
I'll take your word for it. So yeah, there'll be a little bit of adjustment, and I'm kind of a fickle eater, so I'm gonna have to adjust my eating habits depending on where I'm at. Not a big crab guy, so I don't know if I'll be doing the whole Maryland crab cake thing.
Well, there's the Penn State Creamery that's out there, which my grandmother went to virtually every USC home game for about 55 years, and then an away game or two. So I've asked her over the years, like, what her favorite away games were and all that. Penn State for the ice cream, and that's what she went with. So again, anybody making that trip, that's one to put on there.
Yeah, and at Ohio State, they sell some cream puffs right outside the stadium. Best cream puffs I've ever had in my life. Amazing. I don't even know that I care about cream puffs. Those were great. So do the cream puffs in Columbus.
They don't have Heinegate anymore, so I got to find something to do now.
All right, we're going to wrap this up from the Trojans from the Valley with the 2024 schedule just released. Are you concerned about USC landing the type of offense and defensive linemen we need to compete with the Big Ten teams? We are landing a lot of great talent, but I don't see any five-star linemen. Have at it, guys.
I mean, Anthony Lucas and Bear Alexander are right. I mean, I guess they weren't five-star linemen, but I don't know how many programs land like multiple five-star defensive linemen in a class. So it doesn't have to be through high school recruiting. You can get them through the transfer portal. It's always going to be a question. That's the question every year, right? Do you have the talent, and not just USC, but anybody? Do you have the talent up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage to win the national championship that year, or win a conference like the Big Ten or the SEC? So yeah, it's absolutely a question. And USC, I think, is almost always going to have to, at least what we've seen so far, the next couple of years, going to have to supplement in the transfer portal to pull those guys in. But there's some 2024 guys out there still that USC is in contention for, and we'll see sort of what happens. I think it's interesting, again, when we talk about kind of recruiting momentum and filling up the class and all of that sort of stuff. USC, if they play good defense this fall, could get a huge bump in terms of what national big time recruits think about that USC defense. So yeah, you want to leave a little bit of an opening in case you really do hit it defensively this fall, because you could see a big time uptick there, but also that you could go out and get 3 or 4 really big time transfer portal guys if that's the case too.
By the way, I just looked at last year's rankings. There were 15 five-star linemen, and that's if you include the edge guys as linemen rather than linebackers. If you take the edge guys out, there's less than 10. Nobody's landing a bunch of five-star linemen. And it's not like you're going to go to Penn State and Penn State's going to have 13 five-star linemen and we're going to have 1. It doesn't work that way. So they're at least recruiting linemen, some guys that seem to be promising. I mean, there were years under Clay Helton where we didn't recruit any. We get like 1 offensive lineman. And those days are gone, thankfully. So, but just wait till Georgia Southern shows up and they have 6 linemen on their entire roster.
USC starting to chip away at that perception. I mean, they've already got a commitment from Cameron Fountain out of Georgia. So, like you guys said, USC plays better on defense this year. There could be an explosion come signing day. It's just a matter of doing what they need to do.
I think they're making progress, and I think that's what we want to see. Sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower, but they're making progress. They get some, people like the offensive lineman from Mater Dei. If he comes, then you're chipping away, and I think they have a possibility to do that. And I think if they play well next season, people will be further convinced that. Especially linemen on both sides of the line of scrimmage, that SC is again really open for business. I think you'll see a lot more linemen coming, and I think the Big Ten will actually the type of style will encourage players to come to USC. So, guys, a reminder, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to the WeAreSC message board, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle, viewer or listener questions. That'll do it for Tuesday's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. So until next Tuesday, a big thank you again to our panelists. Great job, guys. Marc Kulkin, Erik McKinney, Chris Arledge. And a special thank you, really a special thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Have yourself a great week. And until then, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.